You have been looking in the wrong place. You have been pointing your finger at the man, at the woman, at the institution you see in the world, and you have been wrong. The most dangerous criminals are not in prisons. They are walking free, and they are hidden in the most unsuspected place of all, within your own consciousness. This is not a message of condemnation, but one of the most profound hope you will ever hear. For when you are willing to look with me, past the outer appearance, past the judgment and the blame, you will discover the only battlefield where true crime exists, and in that discovery, you will find the key to your own freedom. Stay with me, and you will learn who the real criminals are. Now, you may immediately object, thinking of the violence and injustice we see reported every day. But I ask you to look deeper, to look not at the act itself, but at the very source from which the act springs. Every deed, whether hailed as virtuous or condemned as criminal, finds its genesis not in the hand, but in the consciousness that directs the hand. A man does not simply pick up a weapon. He first picks up a thought, an idea, a deeply held belief in separation, in lack, in fear, or in justified anger. That internal state, that climate of mind, is the true soil in which the seed of action is planted. Consider for a moment the simple, daily experience of being cut off in traffic. The outer event is merely one car changing lanes. But what happens within you? For a moment, a flash of anger arises. There is a quick, almost automatic judgment. That criminal! That reckless driver! You have, in that instant, identified the criminal as the person in the other car. But pause and look more closely. Where did that anger come from? Did the other driver put it inside you? No. It was a reaction from your own consciousness, a reaction based on a sense of personal violation, a belief that you have been wronged. The feeling of threat, the rush of adrenaline, the mental condemnation. All of that is an activity within your own being. This is a microscopic example of the same principle that operates on a global scale. The real crime in this tiny theater was not the other car's movement, but the inner consent to anger, judgment, and the belief in being a victim. This is the state of consciousness I am speaking of. Now, let us expand this vision. Look at the world. You see conflict between nations, between political parties, between neighbors. The world points to the other side and says, there is the criminal. There is the aggressor. There is the problem. This is the universal deception, the great hypnotism of human existence. We are forever fighting the shadow on the wall, never turning to see the figure casting it. When you believe the problem is out there, you are forever trapped in a cycle of reaction, of blame, of defense, of attack. You are trying to cure a disease by treating the symptoms while ignoring the virus in the bloodstream of human thought. This state of consciousness, which we might call a carnal mind, is one of duality. It sees itself as separate from God, separate from its source, and therefore separate from every other individual. From this sense of separation spring all its activities fear, because it feels alone and vulnerable, greed, because it believes it must acquire to be whole, envy, hatred, and violence. because it sees every other separate entity as a potential threat to its own fragile existence. This consciousness is a closed loop, a self-perpetuating mechanism that can only interpret life through the lens of division. It is the ultimate imposter, masquerading as your own thinking, whispering lies of limitation and conflict. And you, unaware, have been accepting its verdicts as your own reality. This is why the most dangerous criminals are not behind bars. They are the unexamined beliefs, the inherited prejudices, the cherished grudges, and the deep-seated fears that walk freely through the streets of your own mind. They wear the respectable clothes of common sense and the way the world is. They are the thoughts that say, look out for number one, it's a dog-eat-dog world, trust no one. This is the criminal element that goes unpunished because it is so common, so widely accepted that it is considered normal. We live in a world that is largely governed by this state of consciousness, and we wonder why it produces such suffering. The journey, then, is not to hunt down criminals in the outer world, but to become a vigilant watcher at the gate of your own consciousness. It is to question every thought, every reaction, every belief that presents itself to you. When you feel anger rising, do not immediately project it outward onto the person who triggered it. Instead, turn within and ask, what in me believes it has been attacked? What in me is feeling this separation? What state of consciousness is this arising from? This is not a passive acceptance of evil. It is the most active and potent form of spiritual warfare there is. You are not ignoring the crime. You are going to its very headquarters and dismantling its power at the source. When you withdraw the fuel of your belief, your reaction, your consent from the outer appearance, you will witness a miraculous thing. The appearance begins to lose its power over you. The criminal, once seen as a monstrous external force, is revealed as a phantom sustained only by your own uninvestigated thinking. And so, having glimpsed that the battleground is within, a profound and unsettling question must naturally arise. If the enemy is not the person, the institution, or the nation I see across from me, then what exactly am I fighting? The answer reveals the very nature of the illusion. The outer enemy, the one we blame for our troubles, is a phantom, a projection cast upon the screen of world experienced by the unlit projector of our own unexamined consciousness. We are not fighting flesh and blood. We are fighting a shadow we ourselves are creating. Consider the simple mechanics of a movie theater. You sit in the darkness, completely engrossed. You fear the monster. You cheer the hero. You feel anxiety during the chase. The images on the screen appear utterly real and separate from you. They seem to have their own life, their own power to evoke your emotions. But where is the true source of the drama? It is not on the screen. The entire spectacle, the monster, the hero, the sweeping landscapes, originates from a single, concentrated beam of light passing through a film strip in a projector behind you. If you were to turn around and look at that small, transparent strip of film, you would see the true source of the images that so captivated you. The enemy was never really out there on the screen. It was a pattern of light and shadow being broadcast from a specific, localized point. Your life experience operates on this exact same principle. The people and situations you encounter are the screen. Your reactions, your fear, your anger, your judgments are your captivated engagement with the drama. But the projector is your own state of consciousness. The film strip is the accumulated record of your beliefs, your past experiences, your fears, and your sense of separation. You are not a passive victim of a hostile world. You are, in a spiritual sense, the projectionist. And you are constantly broadcasting the very world you believe is attacking you. When you point at the man who wronged you and declare him your enemy, you are like the moviegoer shaking his fist at the screen, completely unaware that he is responsible for the film that is playing. This is the great secret, the pivotal realization that shifts your entire existence from one of passive suffering to active mastery. The political opponent you despise, the difficult relative you avoid, the competitor you fear. These are not the problem in and of themselves. They are the images on the screen. The problem, the only problem there ever truly is the specific configuration of the film strip in your own projector that interprets their existence as a threat. Your belief in being a separate, vulnerable self, adrift in a universe of other separate, potentially hostile selves, is the core narrative of that film. Every time you react with resentment, you are not responding to the person. You are reacting to the shadow your own consciousness has cast upon them. Let us make this practical. You have a conflict with a coworker. They take credit for your idea. The outer appearance is clear they are the villain, the criminal of this office drama. You spend days fuming, telling friends about the injustice, plotting your response. This is you, fully engaged with the movie. Now, imagine turning around. What is the film strip in your projector? It might be a scene from your past, where you felt overlooked and powerless. It might be a deep, seated belief that you are not seen or valued. It might be a fear of lack, a conviction that there is not enough success to go around. Your coworker's action was a neutral beam of light. It passed through your film strip of past hurt and present fear, and it projected the image of a villain onto them. The real battle is not with the coworker, it is with that film strip. The real crime was not their action, but your inner consent to the old, painful story of victimhood and lack. This is not to excuse harmful behavior in the world. It is to reveal its ultimate source and, therefore, the only place from which it can be lastingly corrected. You cannot change the movie by attacking the screen. You can only change it by altering the film in the projector. When you begin the sacred work of cleaning your own lens, of examining and dissolving the old, painful narratives, a miracle occurs. The outer world, which is merely a screen, must correspondingly change. The coworker may still perform the same action, but it no longer triggers the same storm within you. Without your reactive energy, the dramatic conflict simply cannot sustain itself. The enemy, deprived of the reality you gave it, begins to fade, not as a person, but as a threatening force in your life. This is the discovery that the outer world has no power to dictate your inner peace. For you are not a character in the movie. You are the silent, aware space in which the entire projection is appearing. This brings us to the very heart of the great deception, the master illusion that has held humanity in bondage for centuries. We have been trained, conditioned from our earliest moments, to look outside of ourselves for the cause of our experience. When we feel pain, we search for who hurt us. When we feel lack, we look for what was taken. When we feel conflict, we identify the opponent. This entire outward, focused orientation is the very mechanism that perpetuates the dream of separation and conceals the true nature of the enemy. We are like sailors on a ship, convinced the world is moving past us, completely unaware that it is we who are moving, and that the helm is in our own hands. This externalizing of cause is the primary activity of the unillumined mind. It is a reflex, an automatic and unquestioned habit. A thought of lack arises, and instantly the mind scans the outer world to attach that feeling to a person, a circumstance, a bank statement. A feeling of irritation appears, and just as quickly the mind finds a target: the noisy neighbor, the slow driver, the political commentator on the television. We are so swift in this projection that we never pause to consider the original thought or feeling itself. We never ask, from what state of consciousness did this sense of lack or this irritation truly spring? We are like a man who, upon seeing his reflection frowning in a mirror, tries to wipe the scowl off the mirror's surface, never realizing the source of the expression is his own face. Let us take a common daily example. You wake up feeling a vague sense of anxiety, unease you cannot name. This is the initial activity within your own consciousness. But the mind, uncomfortable with this free, floating energy, immediately gets to work. It begins to scan your life for a cause. It latches onto an upcoming work deadline. It says, that is the reason for my anxiety. The anxiety now has a name, a face, a form. You have successfully projected the internal, causeless feeling onto an external event. You then spend your day wrestling with the deadline, trying to manage the anxiety by managing the outer world. But the truth is, the deadline was neutral. It was simply a date on a calendar. The anxiety was already present within you, a shadow from your own consciousness. And the mind, in its relentless outward focus, simply found a convenient screen upon which to project it. The real work was not to manage the deadline, but to turn inward and inquire into the source of the anxiety itself, to shine a light on the shadow rather than fight the screen. This is the grand hypnotism of human life. We are all trapped in a collective agreement to blame the reflection for what the face is doing. We see war on the news and we blame the leaders, the ideologies, the nations. We rarely, if ever, turn inward to ask, what war is raging within me? What inner conflicts? What unchecked hatreds? What judgments and fears am I harboring that contribute to this collective field of consciousness? We fail to see that the outer war is but a macrocosm of the inner war, being fought in millions of individual consciousnesses. The battlefield is not in a foreign land. It is in the silent, private space of your own mind when you condemn another, when you nurture a grievance, when you separate yourself in thought from your brother. This is the ultimate disguise of the criminal. It convinces you that the problem is always out there. It convinces you that your peace is dependent on someone else's behavior, on a change in circumstances, on the acquisition of a possession. This is the lie that keeps you in perpetual bondage, a prisoner to the ever-changing appearances of the world. As long as you believe your inner state is caused by outer conditions, you have given all your power away. You have made yourself a slave to events, a leaf tossed on the stormy seas of external phenomena. The moment you realize that nothing outside of you has the power to dictate your peace, your joy, or your fulfillment, is the moment you begin to reclaim your sovereignty. It is a staggering realization, one that turns the entire world upside down. The difficult person in your life is no longer your problem. They are your teacher, revealing to you the places within your own consciousness where you still believe in conflict and separation. The financial challenge is not a curse. It is an invitation to discover a source of supply that does not depend on outer forms. This is not a philosophy of passivity. It is the most dynamic and empowering stance you can take. It transfers the entire struggle from the unmanageable, chaotic outer world to the one place you have absolute authority, the inner realm of your own awareness. The enemy, once seen as a formidable giant in the outer world, is revealed to be a puppet whose strings are being pulled from within your own mind. And when you see the strings, you can no longer be fooled by the puppet's dance. And so we arrive at the great turning point, the moment of profound personal responsibility that is the only gateway to genuine freedom. To see that the enemy is a projection and the battlefield is within is the necessary revelation. But it is not the end of the journey. It is merely the preparation for the true work, which is the active and vigilant taking of responsibility for the only thing over which you have absolute dominion, your own spiritual perception. This is not the burden of blame the world teaches. It is the glorious and sobering realization that you, and you alone, are the gatekeeper of your consciousness, and therefore the architect of your experienced reality. This responsibility has been avoided for millennia because it seems so immense, so daunting. It is far easier to point to a flawed political system, a difficult parent, a treacherous friend, or a string of bad luck as the reason for our suffering. To accept that our perception is the active ingredient in every experience is to stand utterly alone before the universe, with no one and nothing left to blame. Yet, in that very aloneness lies your power. For if the problem is your perception, then the solution is also within your grasp. You are not waiting for the world to change. You are not waiting for an apology, for a windfall, for a political savior. You are empowered to begin the transformation here and now by undertaking the most important task of your life, the purification of your own vision. Let us be very clear about what this means in the practical moments of your day. It does not mean that you become a doormat passively accepting harmful behavior from others. On the contrary, it demands the highest form of spiritual strength. It means that when your partner speaks to you with sharpness, your first response is not to return the sharpness, which is merely reacting to the outer movie. Instead, you turn your attention inward. You feel the reaction of hurt or anger arise, and you take responsibility for that feeling. You do not say, "You made me angry." You acknowledge, "Anger is arising within me." This simple shift in language reflects a monumental shift in consciousness. You have just reclaimed your power. You are no longer a victim of the comment. You are the aware witness of your own internal reaction. From this place of witness, you can then choose a response. Perhaps a calm question, a setting of a boundary, or a silent prayer that is not born from the reactive, criminal consciousness, but from a deeper, more peaceful center. This is the practice of spiritual responsibility. It is the moment-to-moment work of catching yourself in the act of projection. You are driving to work, and another driver cuts you off. The old, unconscious reaction is to curse, to label them a criminal, to let the anger poison your next hour. The new, responsible action is to feel the surge of adrenaline, to notice the judgmental thought, and to consciously choose not to feed it. You are taking responsibility for the climate of your own mind. You are saying, "I will not allow this outer event to dictate my inner peace. I am the guardian of this consciousness." This is not suppression. It is a profound alchemy where you transform the base metal of reactive emotion into the gold of conscious awareness. Now, apply this to a more entrenched situation. You have a deep-seated financial fear. The world's perception is to look at the bank account, the economy, the job market. The mind wants to project the cause of the fear outward, but to take spiritual responsibility is to turn the light inward and ask, what is the state of consciousness that is perceiving lack? What belief in separation from the source of all good am I entertaining? What film strip of past failure or future worry is currently running in my projector? This is a much more difficult, yet infinitely more productive, line of inquiry. You are no longer fighting the shadow on the screen. You are changing the film in the projector. You are taking responsibility for the very lens through which you are viewing your finances. As you work to dissolve that inner sense of lack, to align your consciousness with the truth of infinite spiritual substance, you will witness a corresponding shift in the outer appearance. Opportunities will present themselves, ideas will flow, not as a reward, but as a natural consequence of the inner adjustment. The outer world must, by spiritual law, conform to the inner shape of your consciousness. This is the ultimate meaning of responsibility. The ability to respond from a center of spiritual truth, rather than to react from a vortex of personal emotion. It is the understanding that you are not here to be saved from the world, but to save the world from the misperception you have held of it. Every time you choose peace over conflict in your mind, you are not just helping yourself, you are withdrawing your consent from the collective dream of separation and adding your light to the collective awakening. The criminal consciousness thrives on our blame, our reaction, our outward focus. It withers and dies in the face of an individual who stands firm in the truth, who takes full responsibility for their inner state, and who therefore cannot be manipulated by the ever-changing dramas of the outer world. This is the path of the spiritual warrior, the only war that ever needs to be fought, and the only one that leads to a permanent and incorruptible peace. This work of inner vigilance, of taking responsibility for our perception, inevitably leads to a question that seems almost too vast to comprehend. If the world I see is a projection of my own state of consciousness, a shadow, play of my own beliefs, then what is actually real? What remains when I cease to project my own judgments, my fears, and my sense of separation onto the people and situations before me? This is the great unveiling, the revelation of the divine reality that stands eternally behind the shifting, fleeting appearance of things. It is the discovery that the world you have been fighting against, the world you have judged as cruel or lacking, is itself an illusion, and that behind it, permeating it, is a single, harmonious, and holy spiritual creation. You see a tree, and you label it based on your past knowledge. You see a man, and you judge him based on his actions or your history. But these labels and judgments are your additions, the film strip through which you are viewing the pure light of being. The tree, in its essential reality, is not the name you call it or the memory you have of it. It is a living, breathing expression of the infinite intelligence and life of the Creator. The man, in his true identity, is not the sum of his mistakes or his personality. He is the very Son of God, a perfect spiritual idea, temporarily obscured by the same cloud of misperception that obscures your own vision. Your entire life, you have been interacting not with reality, but with your interpretation of it. You have been reading the world through a dirty lens, and then complaining that the world is dim and distorted. Let this sink in with a practical example. Consider a situation where you feel you have been deeply wronged by someone. The outer appearance is clear. They acted, and you suffered. The entire world and your own unregenerated consciousness would agree that a crime has occurred. But now, apply this principle of divine reality. You are not being asked to condone the harmful action. You are being invited to look past the action to the truth of the actor. Can you see, even for a moment, that the one who wronged you was themselves asleep, acting out from a state of consciousness blinded by its own sense of separation, its own fear, its own belief in lack? They were not acting from their true spiritual self, but from the imposter self, the carnal mind. The criminal was the state of consciousness that possessed them, not their eternal being. To perceive this is not to excuse. It is to understand the nature of the disease so completely that you refuse to be infected by it yourself. It is to see the Christ, the perfect spiritual idea, even in the one who is currently crucifying it. This is the most radical and transformative perception possible. This is the truth that sets you free. When you look at your financial situation and feel lack, You are not seeing the divine reality. The divine reality is that you live, move, and have your being in an infinite, abundant spiritual substance that can never be depleted. Your sense of lack is a misperception, a shadow on the wall. When you look at a sick body, you are not seeing the divine reality. The divine reality is that your true identity is a spiritual being, whole and perfect, untouched by the beliefs of the mortal mind. The illness is a physicalized shadow of a mental state, not the truth of your being. When you look at conflict between nations, you are not seeing the divine reality. The divine reality is the one, indivisible kingdom of God, in which all individuals, all nations, exist in harmonious, divine relationship. The conflict is the collective projection of millions of separate, fearful consciousnesses. Your entire spiritual work, then, is to align your perception with this divine reality, to see through the appearance to the substance. This is done not by affirming truth against a lie, but by letting the truth dissolve the lie. You do not fight the darkness, you turn on the light. You do not fight the appearance of sickness. You abide in the conscious awareness of wholeness until that awareness becomes more real to you than the physical evidence. You do not fight the person you perceive as an enemy. You silently acknowledge their true spiritual identity until that recognition begins to disarm the conflict in your own mind. As you do this, you will witness a gradual but undeniable transformation in your outer experience. The circumstances may not change instantly, but your relationship to them will. The person may still be there, but the enemy is gone. The financial challenge may remain, but the panic of lack has vanished. You are no longer at the mercy of the appearance, because you have made contact with the reality that underlies it. You are walking through the world not as a victim of its shadows, but as a bearer of the light that reveals them to be insubstantial. You are learning to see not with the eyes of the body, which report only form, but with the vision of the Spirit, which perceives only the presence of God. This entire journey, from recognizing the inner criminal to perceiving the divine reality, culminates in one final, liberating step. It is the pathway to freedom through self-knowledge. This is not the self-knowledge of psychology, which explores the contours of the personal psyche, its traumas, and its desires. This is the profound, metaphysical knowing of the self that you are in truth, the self that is one with the Father, the self that was never born and will never die, the self that exists prior to and independent of all the shifting conditions of the world. To know this self is to automatically and effortlessly withdraw all identity from the imposter, the criminal consciousness, and in that moment, its power over you is broken forever. The chains that bind you are not iron, but thought, and they can only hold a self that believes it is confined. Consider the most powerful example from nature, the acorn and the oak tree. The acorn lives in a state of profound limitation. It is small, hard, confined to the spot where it fell. It could easily believe that its reality is defined by the dirt around it, the threat of being crushed, or the scarcity of water. This is the human experience, the experience of the separate self. But within that acorn is a silent, irresistible knowing, a knowledge not learned, but inherent, of the mighty oak tree it is destined to become. It does not fight the dirt, it uses it. It does not rage against the darkness, it pushes through it. It is driven by an inner blueprint of its own fullness. Your journey is identical. You are not an acorn trying to become an oak. You are the oak tree in consciousness, currently experiencing the limitation of the acorn. Self-knowledge is the process of awakening to the oak tree that you already are, thereby rendering the confines of the acorn shell powerless to define you.